Monaco, 2003. A secret transaction is taking place here. Someone bought a $6 million luxury apartment right here in the Monte Carlo Star Complex, but the identity of the buyer was a mystery. No one knew who that person is. The only detail that was known is the official purchaser. It was an offshore company listed in the British Virgin Islands called Brockville Development. Brockville was in turn owned by the two Panama registered entities. The only thing that was clear is that someone really rich is trying pretty hard to hide their identity below the layers of offshore companies. And the owner successfully was hiding for 18 years. Until last year, when Pandora papers leaked documents that exposed the real owner of that luxury apartment. It happened to be a woman, 28 years old in 2003. And at that time, unknown. The name of that stranger was Svetlana Krivonogih, but her background is modest. She grew up in a communal apartment, sharing a kitchen and a bathroom with 5 families. Krivonogih was a business student and worked as a cleaner in a store, but in the late 90s, everything changed. In the space of a few years, she became extremely wealthy. She acquired a number of luxury apartments and properties in Russia. She owned 3.6% of the bank Russia and other assets worth an estimated of $100 million. You want to know how did she achieve all of that? Just a few weeks before she becomes the owner of the apartment in Monaco, she gave birth to a girl. The child was born at the time when she was in a secret, years-long relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. However, Krivonogih is not the only person linked to Putin named in Pandora papers. There are several others who have close ties with the Russian president, and this $100 million worth of assets is just a small fraction of what Vladimir Putin hides in offshore companies around the world. On average, 10% of world GDP is held offshore. However, in Russia, offshore wealth accounted for as much as 60% of GDP. Russians have about $1 trillion of what is called dark money hidden abroad. About $200 billion are controlled by Russian President Vladimir Putin and his close associates, wealthy Russian known as oligarchs. This money can be exploited by the Kremlin for espionage, bribery, politician manipulation, disinformation, and many other dark purposes. Let's see how Putin successfully managed to hide billions all around the globe and how he has been doing that for the past 20 years without anyone noticing. This is how to hide billions. The enrichment of Putin's cronies began during his first Kremlin term, a time when the president was publicly declaring war against oligarchs. He railed against businessmen who made their fortunes in 90s. In recent years, Putin has complained about unpatriotic tycoons who hide their money offshore. But when Putin became the president and got access to the whole country, he realized that he also wants to live the life of rich Russian oligarchs. He wanted to enjoy mansions, yachts, and to live a billionaire lifestyle. But there was a problem. You cannot be the president and show off publicly. Thus, Putin was looking for a way to enjoy the life of a billionaire but to keep it private at the same time. And he found a way of doing that. He made his childhood friends billionaires by giving them control over the biggest gas and oil companies in the country. In St. Petersburg, Putin learned how to profit from power. He has built a loyal team. After he moved to the Kremlin, they came with him. Putin's assistant became president and then prime minister of Russia. His former assistant now runs the biggest oil company in the country, and his former economist now runs the biggest gas company in Russia. And once Putin becomes the president, he stays in the center of this new elite. He got the power and access to the super rich. It is now obvious that Putin held his wealth via proxies. The president formally owned nothing, but was able to control and use the wealth of his friends. Business and financial institutions linked to them have won lucrative state contracts. This is the only way for Putin to protect his assets that is impossible to justify having with a salary of $143,000 a year. For example, this $35 million yacht that was gifted to Putin by the Chelsea owner and Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich. The yacht was given to an offshore company, but the real owner was President Putin. The usual way that Putin's friends hide their dark money abroad is through shell companies. These oligarchs hired the best lawyers, auditors, bankers, and lobbyists in the world to develop legal means to conceal and launder their funds. A serious oligarch has layers of anonymous shell companies and offshore jurisdictions, and their funds move at lightning speed between them. In 2016, the Panama papers showed one company alone had set up over 2,000 shell companies for wealthy Russians. Of all those in his inner circle, Arkady and his brother Boris Rotenberg have known Putin the longest. Their friendship dates to the 60s. when as boys they sparred together in a martial arts club. The ties of friendship grew to encompass business as well. During Putin's term as Russian leader, the brothers have accumulated a multi-billion-dollar fortune through lucrative contracts with state and state-owned companies, including roughly $7 billion for the Sochi Olympic Games. In 2013, one of Arkady Rotenberg's companies received potentially lucrative government contracts to work on a proposed 40 billion natural gas pipeline between Russia and Europe. Around the same time, 3 anonymous companies made huge payments into the Putin network. 2 of the shadow companies, and likely all 3, were controlled by Arkady Rotenberg. These brothers were linked to $10 billion money laundering scheme that the US government said was knowingly and actively facilitated by traders in Deutsche Bank's Moscow office. In 2017, US and British regulators fined the bank a total of $670 million. Companies linked to Rotenbergs bought more than $18 million in arts in the US, including $7.5 million private sale of René Magritte, 10 paintings spending spree during a Sotheby's auctions of modern art. In total, Rotenbergs and companies linked to them, whose owners were often obscured through middlemen and women, injected $91 million through the US financial system. They had relied on offshore entities to handle the taxes and other issues involving in owning luxury planes and boats. This is Sergei Roldugin, a close friend of Putin's. The two men have known each other for almost 40 years. He may even be Putin's best friend. This mysterious cellist is neither an oligarch nor a politician. Yet he's at the center of the breathtaking story that is hidden in the Panama Papers, the internal documents of Mossack Fonseca, a provider of offshore companies. The papers suggest that a large fortune flowed through a network of secret offshore companies and that the millions set aside in this way not only benefited Vladimir Putin's inner circle, but also his own family. A professional musician, he has apparently accumulated a fortune, having been placed in control of a series of assets worth at least $100 million. Roldugin appears to have been picked for this role because of his lesser profile. He denied in documents to bank officials in Switzerland and Luxembourg that he is close to any Russian public figures. He has also said he is not a businessman. Yet, the files reveal Putin's close friend has 12.5% stake in Russia's biggest TV advertising agency, Video International, which has annual revenues of more than $1 billion. Previously, its ownership was a secret. Roldugin was also secretly given an option to buy a minority stake in the Russian truck manufacturer Kamaz, which makes army vehicles. He also owned 3.2% of Bank Russia. The St. Petersburg private bank has been described as Putin's crony bank. The purpose of Roldugin's network appears to go beyond holding shares and stocks. Its goal is to use offshore companies to set aside millions. To achieve this, they must be able to provide inconspicuous reasons for money transactions, and there are several tricks in order to do this. In 2011, Roldugin's company International Media Overseas concluded an especially lucrative deal when it acquired all the rights to $200 million loan at a price of just $1. According to the contract found, the loan generated interest payments of $21,917 per day, which adds up to $8 million per year. This all raises questions. Was the cellist just being modest about his investments? Was it possible he was unaware of the enormous sums being amassed in his name? Or he acts as a proxy? When asked about all of this, he said he was no businessman. I've got an apartment, a car and a dacha. I don't have millions. And there are about 10 very close friends similar to those mentioned here. In almost every instance, the result is the same. Money and power moves into direction of the network to companies and people allied to Putin. Now, Putin is 69, and he's so afraid to lose his life that he even sits 10 meters away from his closest friends. He can't spend all these offshore billions. Just imagine if Putin would donate the smallest fraction of this money into the medical research or space exploration. He would be remembered as a man who used his power for the good. But now, we can see that power actually made him go crazy. And the only legacy he's leaving is poor Russia and a bloody war in Ukraine. Subscribe now for more documentaries on business, money and power.